Hey guys, I have finally done it, ladies and gentlemen. I have found the one comic book that the entire world has completely forgotten about. I give you Cyber Kitties #1. For those of you who haven't seen my review for Cyber Kitties #2, it was easily one of the worst comics I've ever read in my life. The artwork was sporadic, the plot didn't make a lick of sense, the characters had absolutely no character to them, and it made fun of its nerdly audience like it was written by David S. Goyer. Cyber Kitties #1, however, has one small thing in its favor. It's actually trying to be a good comic. Let's compare covers for a minute. Imagine you're at a comic book store. You know nothing about these characters or the story they're involved in. Which of these covers looks more appealing to you? A bunch of purple heads on an orange background, or an awesome fight scene involving automatic guns, magic, and virtual reality being used against a giant monster? Well, okay, it's not entirely obvious that Morgana's VR has anything to do with what's going on here, but at least she's not just jilling off, which seemed to be her primary concern in issue #2. Speaking of these girls' sexuality, it would be all too easy to put them into ridiculous poses and skimpy outfits to attract new readers with the promise of cheesecake, but they actually downplay it pretty nicely. They're all completely covered from head to toe, except for Alex showing off more cleavage than she probably should be, but it's kind of hard to tell at first since she and the other Cyber Kitties are all holding up their arms in front of themselves as they deal with this monster in their own unique ways. This cover really wants to show us that there are more to these girls than just nice sets of curves. Of course, it doesn't help that we already know that this series is going to take several steps back in issue #2, but I'm just saying, at least this cover is making the effort. Oh, and you'll sometimes hear people refer to leotards as body socks or body stockings, but it seems that Alex here is wearing a body gauntlet. That is a clothing company that knows how to market. Our first story of 4, First Bite, begins with some melodramatic narration about the integration of the city and the internet. The city of matter and its electronic shadow. The two worlds mirror and merge, chrome gleaming in the arc lights, pools of vomit reflected in the carbon steel. Wow, that's really profound. I bet you read The Hobbit. I don't remember the prose from The Hobbit being all that deep or profound, but I just love this page for actually setting up the tone of what this comic is supposed to be. Was issue #2 supposed to be a comedy? Some kind of a social satire? Something deeper? I have no idea. But with Tammy here immediately taking the piss out of Morgana's narration here, all while she's standing on top of a soapbox, now I know that this is supposed to be a comedy. Thank you, comic. Morgana is pissed at the interruption of her brooding, but Tammy calls her downstairs for dinner. Apparently, they live in an apartment building in Seattle, or some other city where space needles are a bit more commonplace in the year 2063. And this is a detail that issue #2 completely forgot about since it put them all in a little house in the suburbs. Morgana, however, isn't too happy about having to eat tofu. I'm supposed to be eating caviar and chipped beef on a wild street corner, or noodles in the rain outside of some evil corporation's secret headquarters. Okay, is this a thing? Eating ramen noodles in the rain? Because I tried to research this and I've got nothing. Aside from getting off, eating ramen noodles in the rain was the only thing that Morgana here ever wanted to do in the second issue. What is this? Alex suddenly enters the scene by blowing out one of their walls with a wrist-mounted cannon of some kind. Alex the Cyber Kitty is RoboCop. Actually, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but as we'll see later on, Alex is actually a cyborg. Or she may just be 100% robotic. The comic doesn't really say which. Isn't it Scrotnig? Look, it comes with coupons! And I'm just going to assume that she is a malfunctioning robot here, because that is the only explanation I can think of as to why nothing she says makes any sense. Morgana complains about Alex messing up the new carpet, and not about completely destroying the wall for some reason, and Alex tries to fix the problem by lighting it on fire. Yeah, she's a robot who has no idea what she's doing. I'm convinced. She then tells her friends about how she heard of someone making a drop of some kind at some corporation, and then we see Morgana flying through cyberspace again. It's not explained what she's doing in there or what she's looking for, since apparently this is happening while she and the other kitties are hiding in a dumpster outside the office building of the corporation they mentioned earlier. Tammy and Alex already know who they need to intercept before they make the drop, and what's being dropped in the first place, so really Morgana's cyber surfing serves no real purpose. They find their quarry amidst a crowd of random animals and other more popular characters who have no business being here, and they follow him into an alley where Tammy tries to subdue him with a spell that will summon a monster with the head of a lion and the body of a lion. I hate to break this to you, comic, but instead of summoning whatever you would call the lion equivalent of an Esquilax, she instead makes a 16-ton weight materialize from out of nowhere and crush the poor mouse. Way to go, Tammy. You're incredibly inept at the dark arts, and now you just killed someone. Alex shoots her wrist like a grappling hook, which I have to admit is pretty awesome, grabs the mouse's suitcase, and proceeds to scale up the side of the building, where she then meets two guys who show up from out of nowhere and are never seen again. Recognize my obvious artistic talent. She goes inside to make the drop herself, and the secretary notices that Alex isn't their regular courier. But thanks to Morgana's hacking, I think, she notices on her computer that they must have changed couriers. And I have no idea why she would come to that conclusion, since the only thing on her computer are lyrics from random songs like Lime in the Coconut and Pink Shoelaces. The future is very confusing. Alex saunters in and makes the drop, which is apparently just a pizza and a couple of drinks. Seriously. That's the big score. And what do they end up getting after all their trouble of killing some snappily dressed pizza guy? $20! We took him for 20 whole bucks! Dream big, Cyber Kitties. Our second story, Mage Rage, opens at a convention where Tammy is going on a shopping spree while Alex and Morgana just hang in the background. Of course, it doesn't take long before Morgana gets ogled by some of the nerdly congoers, but you're not going to see me get angry at this scene, because, hey, at least these nerds actually know what women are. And frankly, if the comic must make fun of nerds, at least it makes sense to put these kitties in a place where nerds are expected to congregate instead of just magically making them appear at their house. And of course, we're going to see some stylistic changes in this artwork, since every story in this comic is drawn by different artists, but this artist apparently forgot that their tails are supposed to be fluffier than that. In the midst of Tammy's shopping frenzy, she trips and gets drenched in some kind of liquid, and we're treated not only to a completely necessary upskirt shot, but also the revelation that she apparently has the power to make her tail disappear. I'm sure that comes in handy every now and then. They get home later that night, and Tammy starts to lament about the drab, dreary world in which they live. She starts to muse about a beautiful new world, full of light, color, and TV glasses. I remind you that we live in a world where you can plug the internet directly into your head. But since Tammy here likes to dress 100 years out of date, since remember, this is the year 2063, apparently she's nostalgic for Google Glass. And the more that Tammy talks about her ideal hippietopia, the more the world around her seems to turn into said ideal hippietopia. Alex and Morgana magically change into clothes like Tammy's, and usually I'm not one to complain about a comic being in black and white, but come on, a scene like this is just begging for the artist to spend a little more for the color printing. Sure, it might hike up the price a little bit, but Lord knows that starving artists always could use a couple extra pennies. Alex doesn't seem to mind this groovy transformation, but her tune quickly changes when her guns turn into flowers. And suddenly I'm wondering how Alex even exists at this point, since I don't easily see robots having a place among hippie circles. Or maybe she's like Pinocchio and all this magical hoo-ha turned her into a real boy or something. Anyway, she rifles through one of Tammy's books and deduces that she was doused in some kind of magic potion at the convention, and that's what's making her fantasies into reality. Man, I wish that I had the power to change the world with only a single thought. That would be so cool. So cool. I'm sorry, I must have nodded out there for a second. Where were we? Oh yes, Alex figures out that they need to drain Tammy's excess power away from her, and Morgana gets Tammy to start talking about her comic book collection. She tells Tammy that she heard that some of her favorite comics will no longer be carried by their local shop. Good to see that comics are still being printed in 2063. And she calls the shop to see if it's true. But because the bizarrely corded phone is hooked up to the Energizer Bunny, that somehow siphons out all of Tammy's powers, and it runs out of the apartment. Their home is now back to normal, and because Tammy had comics on the brain when the energy was sucked out of her, that means that the outside world is now like a comic reader's paradise. And the next time that Morgana steps outside to get groceries, she's gotta be trapped in an entire city full of nerds. I mean, you could even try to make Tammy think of the world as a Jonan Vasquez comic, where you might feel a bit more at home. Our third story, Virtually Yours, opens with Morgana wearing an elegant evening dress instead of her usual goth wear, swooning over a distinguished gentleman collar. And this Harlequin romance novel slams on the brakes as she's magically transported into the worst Salvation Army hand-me-downs imaginable, and onto a tacky game show called Your Dog is Dead. I suddenly see a few holes in Spike TV's schedule getting filled up. It turns out that Morgana was plugged into one of her video games, and Alex just popped her game out so that she could play one of her games. A few questions with this scene. 1. What exactly is the economic status of these girls? The last two stories showed that their apartment was pretty cluttered, but here the only bit of furniture they have is a box for their game system, which is apparently a top loader. Also, the first story showed them being really excited over stealing $20 from the pizza guy, so why would they do that if they're well off enough to buy useless crap from a convention? 2. If they're poor, why? Tammy knows magic, Alex can do damn near anything with her mighty robot powers, and Morgana can hack into any computer system. How hard can it be for these girls to find jobs? 3. Why is Morgana embarrassed by her virtual date game in the second issue when she's completely fine with playing her romance novel game in the same room as her friends? Anyway, she and Alex start to fight over the game system, and Tammy magics up a little lightning to get them to stop. She gets the idea to get another system so they won't have to fight over this one, but since Morgana found this experimental prototype system, in other words, she stole it, there's only one thing to do. Go to the lab where it was developed and see if they can find a new one to steal. Our heroines, ladies and gentlemen. Why exactly does Alex even need a video game system in the first place? With the way that we see every piece of technology somehow integrating itself with every other piece of technology, why wouldn't Alex here have a slot built into her body for video game cartridges? Seriously, no one thought about doing this? So they go to the lab where the game system was developed, and Morgana's patience is wearing thin. Hurry up, I'm working on my high score. Ha! Only time you ever scored. I hate you. After they break in with a little help from Morgana's head interface, nice touch showing off the versatility of her hardware here, it doesn't take long for them to get caught by the lab security. But Alex knows exactly how to get out of this pickle. Oh boys, don't you think you'd better search me first? And after some well-thought-out consideration, they search her in the most professional manner possible. And since we live in a world where apparently sexy robots are so ready and willing that they make guys completely overlook the real women to the extent where a fine thing like Morgana doesn't get any kind of male attention, that actually makes me want to sympathize with her and hope that she'll somehow change that in future issues. After Alex does something with the guards, she and Morgana reprogram a packing robot to take out the scientists who are working on another game system prototype. And why couldn't Alex just deal with them herself? They both make a dash for the system, and suddenly I'm noticing that the calendar on the wall in the background has a pinup of Mrs. Brisby from The Secret of Nim. And personally, I just find that hilarious. I mean, listen to some of this audio from this movie and tell me that it doesn't sound like something else. Alex and Morgana plug themselves into the system, without putting a game into it first. But it seems that it's not a game system, but a computer virus filter. And the story ends with all of them being bundled up since they're now infected with some kind of computer virus, and playing one of Tammy's board games, where, of course, they're fighting over whose turn it is. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba. Our fourth and final story, Love Sucks, opens up with, oh my goodness. Yeah, you know, I appreciate the imagery here, comic, but you're gonna have kind of a hard time convincing me that this girl has a hard time meeting guys. Tammy is picking up a lot of hostility from Morgana. Yeah, doesn't she just look so pissed off right now? But Alex, who looks like Felicia Hardy in this story, doesn't think it's anything to worry about. She's always hostile. She reads to her plant. 19th century French poetry, man. The thing uprooted itself and died. Could have been worse. At least the plant's small intestine didn't leap up through its neck and throttle its brain. The next morning, Morgana isn't quite feeling like herself. Alex offers her a slice of pizza with anchovies, garlic, and salami, but she turns it down. Tammy opens up the curtains, and Morgana hides from the sunlight. They later find Morgana plugged into her game again, and for some reason, Tammy thinks that she and Alex should go into the game to get her out. Okay, what exactly is the issue here? I mean, I know that Morgana's a goth and all, but is a slight smile on her face really that much to get worked up over? They go into the game and find Morgana about to be eaten and or seduced by a vampire. And I gotta say, it's nice seeing that the people of 2063 have rejected the sparkly emo douche in favor of traditional vampire imagery. Tammy tells her to wake up since this is a real vampire, which I think she deduced from Morgana's behavior earlier, but again, Morgana's always been just a goth. Goths generally hate sunlight anyway, and for all you know, maybe it was the salami or the anchovies on the pizza that she was objecting to instead of the garlic. And I'm not against the idea of vampires infecting people through virtual reality, since how would that be any different from computer viruses? But how did a virtual vampire get into a cartridge game? It's been pretty well established by this point that these girls do more console gaming than online gaming, so unless this vampire was actually programmed by the game's creators, how did it get here? The only explanation is that it was written into the game from the game's programmers, but why would they make a product that turns their customers into vampires? Oh my god, I just wrote the next Resident Evil movie! After the vampire tears off some of Morgana's clothes, oh no, how utterly monstrous of him. Alex grabs a giant jack from that 19th century poetry game she mentioned earlier. Why would that be in this vampire game? And the combination of getting staked through the heart and pure poetic suckitude kills the vampire. But of course, Morgana's all bummed out by her being rescued. I could have been a vampire. A real vampire. Black's even my color. Ha 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 ha! She almost suffered a fate worse than death. And so that was Cyber Kitties number 1. And it's interesting, to say the least. Of course, this comic suffers from some plot points being confusing, but it's nowhere near as confusing as issue 2 was. It took a little backpedaling here and there to fully grasp what was happening when I first read it, but at least I could understand what was happening. It's interesting seeing so many artists contribute to this first issue, like they were all so excited to just be a part of this project that they just didn't care about how awkward the script is. It's like they were trying to create the Cyber Kitties as legacy characters before Legacy was even established. It's also interesting seeing all of these stories being written by only one person, but they all vary in terms of coherent storytelling. It's actually kind of fascinating to see how one writer's writing style could be this inconsistent with itself. Like, what was going through this guy's head while he was writing these stories? And we do get to see some real character development from these Cyber Kitties, so I gotta give the comic some points there. All in all, this comic is far from perfect, but for the most part, I enjoyed it. See you next time!
Belong to us.
Recognize my obvious artistic talent.
Subscribe, like, follow, comment.